So here we are again at Bitesize Edge, and today I am going to be spending 30-40 minutes having a conversation with the fabulous Ian Pitchford. Now, Ian, I was working out, I think we go back about 11 years now. Must be about 11 years, or is it longer?
Let me work it out.
While you work it out, I'm going to introduce you as, so Ian, who I've known he will tell us in a moment. How many years is it? I can't see that from here. Oh gosh, okay, yeah, some years. Is a NLP Master Trainer.
2009.
2009, there we go. So I was right, 11 years. So Ian's an NLP Master Trainer, a coach, a leadership trainer, and a speaker, and an all-round kind of outdoors kind of a guy who cracks on. And just for me, Ian, your approach to life is just kind of almost like the Nike strap line, just do it.
Oh, yeah.
About that,
yeah.
You.
I interviewed someone the other week, and they quoted the old American wrestling guy, The Rock. And apparently, and I went and looked it up, and he has a little bit of a philosophy. Make sure you're always the hardest working person in the room.
I like that.
And so I did. I said, right, I'm going to rob that. I'm going to use that. And I think that's kind of just and so that's kind of been part of what's been really important to me throughout the whole of my life, is to be the hardest working person in the room. And not that it's a competition, but actually, and I don't really see a lot of things necessarily as work, but I just see that as whatever you do, commit to it. You know, there is no point in, you know, if you go climbing and you're half-assed at climbing, then the only place you're going to be is casualty. So you commit to it. Whatever it is that you do, you make the most of it. You commit to it, because actually, you know, there's no point in having half the fun, you know, when it's all available. You
also say, so when why I felt the need to do a bit of research about you, and I don't know, but I chose to. And the one thing that came through to me is that you firmly believe in the philosophy and the belief of we're all better than we know.
Indeed. So where that comes from is a guy called Kurt Hahn, and Kurt Hahn's a German. He's a German educationalist. He's founder of Gordonstoun School, where Prince Charles went, and Prince Philip, and whilst, you know, there are many stories about Gordonstoun, but actually I quite liked Kurt Hahn's philosophy, which is we're all better than we know, if only we can be shown the way. And the quote very often gets used on lots of leadership courses, with the idea being is that either leader will show you the way. And actually, when you read the paper that it originally came from, is that it's you that show you your way. It's you that actually have and demonstrate, you know, that shock the living daylights out of yourself by showing yourself just how magnificent that you can be today. And so, you know, as I pit, you know, in terms of that philosophy that sits within NLP and those presuppositions is human potential. The art of human performance is the thing that stops most people from being the most magnificent and best version of themselves is what they believe to be true about themselves. And very often those beliefs aren't theirs. They're things that they've inherited from other people, social conditioning, and, you know, we're taught about, I don't know, things like ego, is that actually you can get something wrong and you could be embarrassed and that would be awful, you know, and possibly to be judged by a complete group of strangers, and that would be awful, even though you're never going to see those people again. So I think, as my children will testament, I don't really have a relationship around being embarrassed. So they find that sometimes a little bit uncomfortable for some of the crazy things that Dad does in public. But actually just get on with being the best version of yourself. And so it means that whole potential and exploring potential, it becomes a dynamic thing. It allows you to be able to go each day, how can I just simply be myself in the world? And actually, what are the limits to that? And should there be any? And so you you keep going, you keep plugging away, and every day it just simply creates a smile.
Okay, which is fabulous, because let's face it, if we can do that in all sorts of times, let alone uncertain times that we're in right now, then that's absolutely brilliant. Taking that philosophy though, Ian, and putting it in the context of the world as it is today, how easy do you think it is for people to engage with it?
I think it's easier than people think it is.
Mm-hmm.
However, I think sometimes we get used to asking the wrong questions about ourselves. We get wrapped up very often in, and I appreciate this might be semantics, but we get wrapped up in too much in the what and the how, as opposed to the who. So one of the probably just before I met you, actually, Pip, I quite deeply connected with Zen and Zen Buddhism. And there's a question that we continually ask in Zen is who am I, or who am I being, and so how am I showing up? So if we live the world outside in, then it's incredibly hard to live that philosophy right now, because actually I can't do the things that I believe define me. So if I'm a climber and I can't go climbing, or if I'm a performer on stage and I feel as though I can't, the opportunity is denied me. So therefore then I can't be who I believe I am. But alternatively, if we live inside out, which is a much more peaceful place to live, is actually, if I am creative, whether I'm sat at the dining room table with my children, or whether I'm thinking about how to construct a leadership program for a large blue chip company, actually who I'm being at that time is creative. And actually the manifestation of that is how I go about it. So for me, it's really important just to strip back some layers and step away from sometimes step away from the how, and we get too locked into identifying and defining ourselves by our behaviors, as opposed to who am I being and how do I want that to show up today. Okay, so how does that, and I like that concept, and I'm going to come back in a moment to an exercise I often do with people called be, and how often the be bit is the bit they struggle with the most. But I want to understand your view then around, because often people say, so it's not about those things, it's about the why. What's your why, i.e. purpose? Where does it sit in line with the who? So I mean, essentially that's the bit that sits behind it, isn't it? That's the bit that drives it. And actually one of the things that depending on which petrol station psychology publication or / pseudo spiritual book you pick up, is there's some idea that culturally social conditioning has taught us that there's this one defining life purpose for you, and that somehow you'll do some massive amounts of emotional time team type stuff and you'll have this epiphanal moment and you'll discover it, and it's somehow out there in the ether. And I'm sure for some people that is, they've had their lightning bolt, their light bulb moment, and then suddenly they've connected. But actually, one of the other things is that I believe around that is that also you get to choose it, because you get to live your life. And so I know the things that really resonate with me. So servitude is something that's really important to me, and that's not that word sometimes gets taken out of context, but to be in the service of others, right? To therefore then be able to be in a position to recognize that everybody can be the best version of themselves, and that everybody can explore and understand what it is that makes their heart sing, and those things are independent of finance. Those things are independent of physical location. They're a relationship with those ideas, but actually you can choose how you want those to manifest. You can choose how you want those to show up. So right now, if I was in front of a a group of senior leaders in a blue chip organization, I would be working quite hard right now to understand how I help them be the best version of themselves. Right now, actually, what goes through my head is how do I get to be right now the best guest? How do I get to be the best version of myself, which makes it easy for you to be able to be a truly fabulous interviewer, which means then that the quality of what you produce that people then listen to is going to truly make their heart sing. And I think it's arriving without an agenda around that and just going, actually, that is my purpose. But also I recognize that that's a really useful thing. And it's to choose how I want to explore that and show it in the world.
And how does that align to intent?
I suppose tomatoes, in Devon, scone or scone, whichever way you put round, whether you're a jam first and a cream, or whether you're a cream and then a jam, that can cause carnage around here. but I think I think there's a whole host of words that people use, like intent, purpose, why. I suppose you and I naturally as NLPers, we have a little moment around the use of the word why, but I get why people, would do that. It's actually energetically what is driving you, what is going to go. We've had that moment, whether you call it in the zone, whether you call it your sweet spot, whether you call it your spiritual connection, your divine gift. I think fundamentally that the language we use around it is going to depend upon your life's framework. Okay. If you're a Christian, you're going to talk about it in one way. If you're a Buddhist, you may talk about it in the other. I think ultimately it's about, for me, it's about how do you want to be in the world.
And I think one of the things that fascinates me with people when they might have real clarity about how they want to be in the world, how they want to be perceived, but how they also want to perceive themselves. And the block can be around them giving themselves permission to do so.
Absolutely, and I think and there's lots of change work that people can do around giving themselves permission, but sometimes actually we've got to question is the how the problem for them.
Okay.
Because actually if I was, if one of the things that really drove you was to be kind, and you've only got one way of being kind, and you now can't do it, does that mean that you're now not a kind woman? Because that would be living outside in. Whereas actually, if kindness and generosity of spirit, and recognizing that everybody has the potential to engage in the world in a way that they'd want to, then actually that's something from the inside out. So actually, if you hold that to be true, a little bit like, your true north, your pole star, whatever it is that is your focus, is that you'll find lots and lots and lots and lots of different ways in every moment, in every heartbeat, in every breath of being kind. And so sometimes for me, I think the permission piece can be a little bit of it can sometimes be a little bit of a red herring. It's a great starting point to allow people to go, I want to create some change, and I'm in a place where I'm stuck, and actually it's about now indulging, but actually it's the bit that comes next. So what is it in all of that you're identifying with? Because otherwise, are you just swapping one set of behaviors for another? And some may be healthier, but if you don't get to do them, are you now still locked in a place of pain?
Okay. And again, I see where that sits. If I throw one of the other things that gets often is presented to me is the relationship between purpose, whatever terminology you want to use around it, and self-worth. And then if you overlay that with someone being in a position of kind of not, because I often see permission, Ian, as for some situations it can be about the person choosing not to see that they can give themselves permission in order to avoid the doing.
Absolutely, and of course we're left in a position then going, actually, what's the benefit of of doing that. And there are many people, you know, that I have worked with over the years, and I'm sure you have, Pip, who are locked in a place where actually having the problem, they perceive having the problem as a greater benefit to them and brings them greater sense of purpose and value because of whatever it gives them. So actually they're never going to give themselves permission to evolve, to change, to be the person they want to be, but no, it's not there. So they live with the pain and articulate the pain, but actually they're locked in that place of living and, you know, and sometimes actually enjoying the secondary game. And actually we've got to be gentle in those situations because I mean, you mentioned a phrase there about self-worth, and actually it's about what people perceive to be true around that. And so once again, if I see my self-worth as being measured externally, then actually sometimes the dramas that I create in life, or the things that occur, or the external gratification, the external identification, and sometimes that gets locked into a set of behaviors. You know, and actually social conditioning does that, doesn't it? You know, we've all been around young people in life that have, you know, if you do this, you will get, if you do this, you will get, you know, fantastic. You know, and we all end up being, you know, hiding in plain sight. So how many adults have you and I both coached over the years who literally, you know, will turn around and say, well, I grew up in a household where children were seen and not heard. And they're hiding in plain sight, and they're living a life and not living the life that they want to live because they're locked into a relationship with external measures. So they never found their own voice, and it's not comfortable for them to be seen. So I don't know if I've answered the question there.
Yeah,
Dancing around the houses, but I think, you know, I mean, for me, the thing that I talk about a lot. So I've currently got an empty coffee cup, and if you were to say to most people, and I say empty purely for the listeners, so there's no coffee in the cup. Should I say? I'm going to redefine our language.
To be clear,
there's no coffee in the cup
or anything else.
Yeah. Or is there? So if you were to say to most people, is the cup empty? Then they'll turn around and say to you, absolutely, because there's nothing in it. But of course, the cup's full of air. And so the cup, whether the cup's half full of coffee and half full of air, or whether it's got tea in it or green tea or whatever, but it can't ever not be full. And that's a little bit like, for me, that's a little bit like us. If I pride coffee over air, then of course the cup is empty. And so if I just recognise that actually today I'm full of being Ian Pitchford, it's only a challenge if I like bits of me and don't like bits of me. So I can conceive of myself now as being half empty or half full, and so therefore then I go looking to be topped up or filled up from external things. And we all do that. You know, we all grew up in a place, and that's kind of, and so part of my passion in life, for not only for myself, but you know, for the people in my life, the people I coach, is actually sometimes the challenge is not whether you have enough of what you think it is. It's how are you judging what you currently are?
Yeah.
So if you deem that you're not enough, then you won't feel worthy.
And that's interesting, isn't it? Because it's so integral, depending on what, you know, we go back to the belief you wholeheartedly hold, that we're all better than we know. It's that moment of suddenly realising our true capability, and that actually if we stop the dialogue that limits, or potentially that we go back to for recognition, actually we open up a massive opportunity, which is really scary because it's the unknown, isn't it? But if we're not used to being in a place of going, I'm going to be happy with who I am, where I am, and recognise my true worth and see how I move forward, then there's an element of wanting to step into that. You know, the phrase that comes into my mind, and I think about a conversation I had with someone recently, is that all feels remarkably egotistical. When you're that all feels remarkably egotistical. And I kind of go, well, it's interesting, isn't it? Because it's almost the opposite. it's moving away from having that ego that stops you and restricts you to allowing yourself to just go with what is going to come through.
Yeah, and so ego is an interesting word, isn't it? Ego is a fascinating word, and what ego has become socially, it is quite interesting, and there's probably a period of time in, certainly in my initial coach education, where people will tell you that you need to be, you need to lose your ego and not invest in the outcomes of the coaching and all of that stuff. But actually, it's about a measurement. Whereas if you take, if we dive back, depending on whether you want to look at Jung or Freud or Adler or whoever, you want to pick up a definition of ego. Essentially, what we're talking about when we think about it is a sense of who I am.
Mm.
And if the sense of who I am is that actually I'm magnificent, is that I'm worthy. I draw breath today. I'm on the planet and I'm worthy. And I'm as worthy of being here as every other single human being, whether you be black or brown or tall or physically abled or emotionally challenged, that you are worthy. You are worthy because you are here and you are a beautiful human being. Unfortunately, I can say that in some places and people will burst out laughing and go, "You've not met my neighbours." But actually, but because I believe that, that's an incredibly powerful place. Does that make me egocentric? Probably yes, actually. And I like it because I have a relationship with my sense of self. But what I also work on in that process is, and I think actually what most people think of as egocentric really is probably being narcissistic. Is needing the attention for something. But what I also work on is that if you want to be loving in this world, then you have to have it to give.
Mm-hmm.
You have to have it to be able to share it. You have to be able to do it. If you want to be able to respect other human beings properly for who they are, not what they can do for you, then you have to have it to be able to give. In the same way that you've got to have, if you want to give the kids spending money, for a school trip or whatever it is, you've got to have the cash in your bank account. And so actually my duty, my responsibility is to cherish me, is to love me, is to respect myself. Because if my cup floweth over, I now have it to share. Whereas when I show up in a conversation with you, Pip, if I'm feeling anything less than totally loved, that's my choice, I'm going to place that burden on you. And I'm going to encourage you to go, and how many conversations do we have? How many relationships have we all been in over time where when someone would say to you, "I love you," not because they meant it, because they wanted someone to say something back.
Yeah, absolutely.
So it's quite an interesting thing that occurs in a relationship. And it's quite fascinating to notice when someone pays you a compliment and you just say thank you, or someone says, "I love you," and you simply just go, "Thank you." And it's quite interesting. So I just see it, for me, I want to be in a relationship and relationships with people, all sorts of different people, because of who they are, not necessarily always what they can do for me.
Yeah. Okay.
And so it means that you pay attention to people in different ways.
That's enriching, isn't it? Completely enriching. So Ian, for a bit of comparison then, how was your world pre-Zen, pre your journey into self-development, self-awareness, in your former life? What's, if you're the person who you were, because obviously you were in the Navy, weren't you?
I was, yeah.
Yeah. So the person that you were then, in comparison to who you are now, what are the key observations for you?
Strangely enough, and this will probably be hard for people to get their head round, it was pretty similar. Although the one thing that it's probably one of the things that led to my leaving, is the one thing that there is an infrastructure, there is a, I use the phrase social conditioning all the time. It comes from social learning theory. Actually, we are influenced by the environment that we're in. But people would say things like, if you want to get promoted, you need to do this. You need to think about this. But I was always pretty much me. I always used to say, where I grew up, we lived on a main road not far from a really big municipal park with a boating lake and all sorts of stuff. And so what regularly used to happen a couple of times each summer was there'd be kids that would wander past the end of our gate, and essentially what would happen is they'd be on a picnic with their parents in the park, and they'd go for a wander or go to play and actually end up coming out of the park and walk. And I always used to say, if as a child, if ever I got lost, I'd want to get found by my mother, because the number of times that actually there'd be children in our house who, or old people that had got a bit confused and got a bit lost, and just my parents' capacity just to be able to give of themselves, so freely, and their house and tea and cake and all those things that they did, and the difference and the impact that they just allowed people to be in a space where actually in their moment of confusion, when you think you've lost your child, actually, they're okay. And whilst and they are things that really sort of sing out for me. And that's one of the reasons why I joined the armed forces, because actually to be in service to a whole nation, to be in service to a community. And what I found is a place where it was really easy to be in service of those that you served with. I joined at 18, as a young naval officer, and quite often a lot of the people that you work with or work for you were old enough to be my dad. And actually, I didn't necessarily appreciate the significance of what was going on in their lives. But what I did know was that I had some authority and a position of responsibility. And actually, by building relationships and asking questions, then I could help them on their journey. And that's what I saw my job was. And of course, and I went to a few interesting places and saw some quite interesting stuff in service life. And when everyone stood there and turns at you and asks the question, "What are we going to do next, sir?" There is no ego. You can't create, there can't be any bullshit, because the answer to the question now may actually impact someone's life quite significantly. And so that idea of just showing up and being who you are is probably same then as now. I think probably now I have way more different ways of articulating it, and rather than it being a sense of something, if I was to rewind 20 years, now I have a much better relationship with what it actually is, and exploring it. I think sometimes the idea of exploring our purpose or who we are and all those things, like your first ever big piece of emotional change work that you do, initially it feels a bit scary, and it people do some emotional sweating, whereas now, it's just an evolutionary part of life.
Yeah. How do you actively encourage your children? Do you actively encourage your children to think in this way? Because I think restrictions through education, through peer pressure, through social media, all those sorts of things actually put greater pressure on young people today to be measuring themselves against others as opposed to against themselves. How do you help that with your two children? How do you encourage them to do it differently?
I think the first thing is role model. I think that me and Sarah, my wife, who's also does some very similar stuff, to me, and make sure that I stay on the straight and narrow in our business. So it's role modeling it. It's showing it. I think it's things like apologizing. It's things about actually talking about intent. It's about having conversations and going, I know this hasn't gone well. I'm sorry. Actually, what I was intending to do, and also recognizing there's conversations that certainly me and my daughter have had where I've sat down with her and gone, you may be 17 for the first time, but I'm also the dad of a 17-year-old for the first time. We're both making it up as we go along here, and to be honest about that. But formally, I think the big thing that we do is we talk about it. We talk about it practically and pragmatically. So actually every day there is a period of time every day where we talk about what were the best bits of our day. And then the next question always is, and so who were you being in that moment? So my son's best bit yesterday was about mucking about in the water. And I said, so who were you being? And he said, I was just being fun-loving, and I was just being creative, and I was just mucking about, and I was being Charlie. And actually, those conversations and asking them questions, not necessarily always about what they do, but who they were being, and allowing them an opportunity to explore, and talk about who do you want to be, not necessarily how do you want to do it, because that'll pan out.
Brilliant. And that almost brings us straight back to where we started, talk about who do you want to be. It's fascinating. Who would you, for someone who was new to, let's hone it into NLP now. For someone who was new to NLP and wanting to really understand the benefits it would potentially bring them, how would you encapsulate that as a sentence? Or maybe two, Ian.
That's a hard. The reason why that's a hard question is because obviously as an NLPer, we're going to pace and lead, so it depends on who was asking. But in essence, if you want to connect, with being the best version of yourself, then and are prepared to explore what that might look like, then come and join the gang. Come and join the gang. Always going to be slightly careful around. I am going to talk about how you do that, because actually, I got sent an advert the other day. You could do an NLP practitioner training online in the States for $7.50.
God.
And that just makes me
twitch.
Yeah, because. Just because of the consequences of that, and actually, choosing that. So I would, so essentially it's about being the best version of yourself, and come and explore what good quality, real, passionate, vibrant, change would look like for you, and do it with a really good quality provider, and not some kind of, random online box clicking, non-certified, non-accredited thing.
Absolutely. So Ian, you've recently qualified as a Master NLP Trainer. As we wrap this podcast up, how can people find you? I know I'm happily pushing people in your direction who might want to do their trainer. How can people find out more about you and what you do?
How can they find out more about me and what we do? So I am on all the usual social media platforms, Facebook and Instagram, at A Mind for Adventure. You can find me online at www.amindforadventure.com. You can come and listen to me speak at the 2021 NLP conference. What else? I suppose you could just drop me drop me an email.
Old-fashioned these days.
Pardon?
It's a bit of an old-fashioned way these days.
Yeah. Or I suppose all the other thing is Pip is you know, and I'm sometime I'm sure we'll reciprocate, is you can also probably also hear my podcast that I've been going for about 18 months now. You know, so you'll get a sense of who I am as you listen to me interview people.
Brilliant. Thank you. Ian, thank you very much for your time today. It's been fabulous. For those people listening, you can come and find us on Spotify and on iTunes under Bitesize Edge, where we have a whole list of people. We've spoken to industry leaders such as Ian, other Edgeites, as we like to call them, and some other fabulous people. So do come and have a listen.